All right. I had to take a breather or take a break, I should say, for the class. I'm done with that now. I'm about to get back to recording these. This is going to be I guess, a two-part session. I might go for a whole nother hour. I don't know. But right now, I am in the middle of addressing that recent Dr. Phil episode on cultural appropriation. Um, and I guess I'm just going to continue watching parts of it and kind of giving my thoughts on it. But I'm gonna try to pick up where we left off or thereabouts.
You're Brittany,
There we go.
right? Do you think black people appropriate?
I think it's possible for Black people to appropriate a different culture.
Okay, so I wasn't paying attention because I was distracted right before I ended because of my class. I noticed I was late for my class, so she did answer the question, and she did basically note that she thinks it's possible. So she was careful in the same way that the professor was, and I wasn't listening to her answer. So my apologies from before. I got to do a better job of listening, especially when I'm giving my take on things.
Just because Black culture isn't the only culture that exists, and every culture has their own boundaries or things that they find offensive and things they want other cultures to respect.
How many
Did
of
she
y'all
say black
agree?
culture is not the only culture that exists? I think because that would make more sense given what she was trying to say.
How many of y'all agree
Hold on, let me
with?
back up.
Because
Do you think black people appropriate?
I think it's possible for Black people to appropriate a different culture, just because Black culture isn't the only culture that exists, and every culture has their own
Black culture
boundaries
isn't
or
the
things
only
that they
culture
find
that exists, is
offensive
what
and
she said.
things they want other
Or what she
cultures
meant.
to respect.
How many of y'all agree with the doctor here that cultural appropriation is on the same level as racism or sexism? How many of you agree that it's serious like that? How many of you say no? I think that's overblown. Okay, most of you think that's overblown. Is it they just don't get it?
Well, uh, when we talk about systemic racism, which many of us started talking about after George Floyd's murder, we started seeing the ways in which white supremacy is embedded in everything. In everything. And cultural appropriation is about that. It's not only about that, but it is
I'm
about that. People don't walk
disagreeing
into a
her heart
space and
out.
are just raced. You are race and. You're not just raced. So there's race and gender, there's race and religion, there's race and sexuality, there's race and body type.
So I kind of understand the gesture towards or the explicit naming of intersectionality and how I think he genuinely thinks it applies. I could have sworn I heard him say that you're not just raced, uh, which is like a past participle. Like if I'm hearing him correctly, that makes it sound like race is the kind of thing that happens to a person as opposed to the kind of thing a person is. And so I don't first of all, I got to put a caveat here. I don't know if that's what he meant to say or if that's what he means. But if he does mean that, that's weird. Um or there's at least a tension there because most people are used to thinking about their racial identities or their ethnic identities as something that they are, not something that happened to them. I guess to kind of give some credence to the idea, um, there is a contingent on the left that thinks of race as inherently a social construct, but not only that, it goes even deeper than that. It's that it was the nefarious creation of certain groups of people who we would now identify as white people, to enable certain kinds of subjugation that they were able to benefit from in all sorts of ways, socially, politically, and economically, i.e., the institution of chattel slavery, the Jim Crow South, perhaps in contemporary times, the prison industrial complex, etc. Those are institutions that these people believe were enabled partly because of the kinds of racial categories on top of which we've based historically, at least, social hierarchies. So that's kind of the basic idea. And so racializing a person or racing a person might be understood as foisting onto them a certain kind of socially and politically salient category that then you can build all kinds of hierarchical structures on them, which have all kinds of implications for how they're allowed to live and what you can force them to do and how you can treat them. And in a social and political context, that can be diabolical, say in the context of chattel slavery, because to be black meant that you were literally somebody else's property and that you couldn't be anything other than that in a certain time period in history. And so if you think so there are people who are this cynical, they think that this was actually deliberately constructed or orchestrated precisely for the purpose of being able to subjugate people so that you could extract wealth or create wealth without having to pay people or compensate people, i.e. the slaves, who weren't regarded as people, by the way. They're regarded as property, quite literally. Okay, so there's a view. I summarized it. I'm sure that I can imbue it with a lot of different details and probably steelman it even more. But that's what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing him correctly, and he's saying you're not just raced. And there some people who are proponents of this view think that these racial categories are things that have lingered on beyond the Jim Crow South and beyond slavery to now to contemporary days, but they're still, because they're nefarious in intent, they're I guess still inherently nefarious. There's all kinds of problems with that, in my opinion, but I guess that's a view one could hold. And if he's gesturing in any way, shape, or form like that, and this is the kind of thing that college professors think, not necessarily all of them, but a lot of them do. If that's what he means, if I'm hearing him correctly, if I'm not misunderstanding him, and I totally could be. I want to keep emphasizing that. That he's gonna inherit all of the, I think, potential problems with that way of thinking about race. Because there's a lot of things that don't add up. There's a lot of projection, or not necessarily projection necessarily, but there's a lot of presumptions, of presumptiveness about the nefarious intent of white people who were in positions of power back in the day. I don't know that it's the case that groups of white people racialize people in such deliberate nefarious ways and or for deliberate and nefarious purposes. I think that it's easy to understand the diabolical and nefarious nature of chattel slavery now in our contemporary times. But I don't know that I don't know that white people back then were so intentional about racializing people. I really have serious doubts about that. I think that they wanted to subjugate people for the purposes of extracting labor. I think that that's true from slaves. But I don't know that they're like, yeah, but we got to make sure that we socially construct race in such and such a way. They're never going to see it coming. Like, I mean, if that's how you think it happened, I guess maybe. But a lot of times these things are not orchestrated with that much intentionality and that much cogency with respect to what the future implications or future consequences are going to be. So that's what's implied by describing it that way. So I just have doubts about that. That doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, I'm gonna keep going.
So all of that becomes embedded when we talk about systemic racism.
She's just disagreeing her ass
And that's
off.
what's
She's
missing
like,
from
nope,
conversations
you're
about
wrong.
cultural
Nope.
appropriation. We only want to focus on race, but not one person in this room is just raced.
Raced.
That's what I challenge, and that's why
Not
age becomes
just
part of this.
raced.
That's why gender becomes.
Now,
part of
it may be a quirk or idiosyncrasy in terms of how he pronounces it. I don't know if he means it. I put a lot into what I'm interpreting from what I heard him, the way I heard him pronounce that, raced. Not people are not just raced, as if race is the kind of thing that happens to a person. People are not just gendered. People are not just aged. Although that has a kind of, I don't know. That's what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm reading too much into it. And to whatever extent I'm misunderstanding him, I apologize to him and to my viewers, all 10 of y'all, because I don't have that many. I'm just talking to myself.
part of this. Dressing up as women and thinking that's funny. That's cultural appropriation. That's mocking women, and we make lots of money.
Are
doing it.
trans?
What do you guys think?
I keep coming back to this.
Yes,
Are
ma'am.
the trans people mocking
In
women?
a
Trans women
multicultural
mocking women?
society, I don't think that the boundaries between cultures are that rigid. I think they're somewhat fluid.
I like her.
And so, at the end of the day, we're talking about hairstyles. We're talking about clothing. There's so many bigger fish to fry. We have this grievance culture. Everybody has a grievance about something. And, I just think that it's really not that big of an issue.
Victim
How many
culture.
of you agree with that?
Damn, it's most people.
Most of you do. Yes, sir.
It seems to be an American issue. My wife recently, my beautiful wife, who knows pretty much everything.
Good catch on that.
She
Good
recently
catch.
wanted to buy a kimono because she
Is that
thought
his
they were
wife?
beautiful. So she checked in with
Is
a
that his
Japanese
wife?
friend of hers to make sure
I
that she
feel like that was
wasn't
his wife.
participating in cultural appropriation. And her Japanese friend said that it would be celebrating her culture.
The fact that we can share styles and clothing and food is a very beautiful thing to be
but
celebrated.
But sharing and then having somebody else get credit for it. See, that's what the issue is. The issue is I've done my homework and you're going to copy it and the teacher's going to praise you for doing the homework. That's what cultural appropriation is.
Okay. There's actually some substance there that I want to give credence to. I want to try to steal man because I think that's probably the strongest facet from that point of view. People, you typically left of center who really take issue with this, seriously, genuinely take issue with this, is there does seem to be something intuitively wrong with let's use the term that everybody else uses, appropriating facets of cultures that are not your own in the intuitive sense of like your where you come from and your culture or your cultural background, whatever it is. It's not the origins of the elements that you're taking on, that you're imitating, that you're emulating, that you're stealing, that you're appropriating, whatever term you want to use. But you're passing it off as if it is yours though. And kind of taking credit for it as if you did originate it though, because there's something inherently deceptive about it. And I think the intuition is that insofar as it constitutes a form of lying and or theft, that there's a kind of intuitive moral reprehensibleness to it. That we find it's the kind of thing that we would find morally reprehensible to the extent that we were made aware of it. And I think that he's right about that. Basically, I do think that if you're going to take a hairstyle that is not native to your culture, adopt it, and then act like you invented it when you didn't, there's something wrong about it. Now, I don't know if it's the level of wrong where it needs to be legally actionable. I don't know if it's the level of wrong where we need to exert a lot of political energy and capital into adjudicating it in some way, in some kind of informal way, or raising awareness to it like it's a really huge problem. Because I feel like there are bigger fish to fry than that. Out of all the problems in the world right now, that ain't one of the biggest ones. And if you think it is one of the biggest ones, how much of a privileged life do you live? I mean, when it comes to the discourse on privilege, that should show up somewhere in that discourse. That what you have to worry about is that people are appropriating those cultures. That's the bane of your existence. I mean, we got motherfuckers that's worrying about eating today, getting potable water today, trying to get well from all kinds of preventable illnesses today. Motherfuckers dying of COVID and shit today. And if it's near and dear to your heart, you got motherfuckers that are tripping over global warming and climate catastrophes that are impending, hurricanes that are hitting places like Florida with Hurricane Ian and whatnot. Cultural appropriation is where you spend your time and energy. I mean, priorities, #priorities. So I get it. But to go back to try to steel man him, I do think that he's not wrong, and the people who sincerely, take this issue up aren't wrong to point that out. Now, the most robust version of this, and I think the most egregious versions of this, is when this is done either in the context of or in conjunction with like colonization. So the primary means or a means, one of the most diabolical means by which things get appropriated is certain territories where those customs are native get taken over by colonists, by people who just boogang entire fucking nations and shit, and they like we here now, and we own your shit now, like on some do something, I dare you, like that's fucked up, like in a major way. And so anybody who's citing those historical examples of that kind of thing, they have a point, and I think that we would do well to not conflate those more egregious examples of this kind of thing with the way more innocuous examples that tend to come up in contemporary times. Motherfuckers wearing braids. Kim Kardashian wearing braids is not the same thing as motherfuckers taking over entire fucking territories in the continent of Africa and shit, and extracting natural resources from the peoples that they've been raping and pillaging for decades. That's not the same thing. Those are not morally equivalent at all. The level of egregiousness between those two are vastly different, right? And it feels like the discourse on cultural appropriation is desperately trying to equate in terms of having the same level of moral atrocity. Somebody like Kim Kardashian wearing braids with something like what I just described in the raping and pillaging of various different places in Africa. And I just think that that doesn't serve our discourse whatsoever to fail to make those obvious moral distinctions. We make moral distinctions between levels of egregiousness all the time, right? Like, I mean, just the sheer scale and the massive degradation of those places and those people are vastly different. I can't think of a single person who's died as a result of a white woman and braiding their hair. Like, not one single example. And maybe there might be one. Drop it in the comments if you have one. But I don't think Kim Kardashian has. I don't think anybody has died as a result of Kim Kardashian braiding her fucking hair. So, like, I don't know, man. I like, get a grip, people. Stop being so woke-tarded.
Yes.
Okay, well, Will Witt is a former Prager University personality and current editor-in-chief at the Florida Standard. Now, he joins us virtually.
This is another
Will,
dude from
what
PragerU.
prompted you to make that video?
Well, really, I made that video to prove anti-white ivory tower professors like the one in your studio wrong. I mean, this video and the others that I've made like it with Native Americans, with Mexicans, with the Chinese you just watched are irrefutable evidence that people like that professor are exactly wrong on cultural appropriation. And if we want to go back and we want to talk about the hairstyles and things, just bringing this up, I mean, I've seen people get offended by braids and say, oh, you know, braids are a black people thing and white people can't wear braids. It's called a Dutch braid. It was from back in Nordic times, old Nordic times, with white people, with Vikings, would wear braids, yet people want to come and claim that it's some part of their culture now. No, you can't claim that something is just a part of your culture either. It's for people to share and celebrate and use so you can actually have a society that is cohesive and works together as a melting pot, not all these different groups that can't work together because everyone's so offended. The only people who are actually offended
I don't know
by
that braids
cultural
are Dutch
appropriation
originally.
don't really have anything else of meaning going on in their lives.
That needs to be fact checked.
Yeah.
Well, that's rich.
You say people.
He might be implying kind of what I'm getting at by saying, well, that's rich. I actually want to get to the bottom of this. I'm gonna do some research. Which culture indicates? Genuinely curious. Google says African culture. The origin of braids can be traced back 5,000 years in African culture to 3,500 BC. I guess that would be BCE. They were very popular among women. Braids are not just a style. This craft is a form of art. Braiding started in Africa in the Himba people of Namibia. Fascinating history of braids you never knew about. Who invented braids? The history of braided hairstyles. The first braids were likely worn by Africans as early as the year 5000 BCE. Okay. So I don't think braided hair originated with the Dutch. The oldest known reproduction of hair braiding may go back about 30,000 years. The Venus of Willendorf. That's from Wikipedia. The Himba culture in Africa. Respect our roots, a brief history of our braids. Essence magazine. Box braids specifically have their origin in South Africa, dating back to 35,000 BC. The box braid hairstyles we know it today. Okay. I just don't know enough about braids. All right. So I did a quick cursory Google search. A lot of sources are saying Africa. That doesn't surprise me. Will Wheat never, or whatever Will Witt, I don't know his last name, never presented any evidence. So maybe if he has some counter evidence, I'll weigh it. Let's just, so I'm just gonna put a pin in it. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the origins of hairstyles, but let's say that the first human beings to braid their hair, and anything resembling what we know today as braids, were African peoples, then in some sense that would be a strong case that it originated in Africa. And so it's essentially black in the sense that anything from Africa is considered black. Although that's going to be troublesome though, because black is a very modern concept. Braids predate the concept of black as an identity category or as a racial category by probably thousands of years. So retroactively applying that concept thousands of years earlier than it was actually invented is a kind of anachronism that I don't want to commit. I'm at least smart enough to recognize that, and I know enough about history to recognize that that's not the. When it comes to historical accuracy, that's not the kind of thing you want to casually do and make a habit of. But I'm only using it now because that's the kind of thing that people have in mind. Is some kind of ancestral connection to Africa and African peoples is typically the kind of thing people have in mind when they say black. Although even that's problematic, because if all humans originated in Africa, then technically all people have origins in Africa, and therefore all people would be black. So that's not going to be a satisfactory definition either. But oh man, this is complicated. And it kind of underscores how silly a lot of these distinctions are. But they do have a kind of salience in our contemporary times that I don't want to downplay, at least in terms of the importance for understanding why people are up in arms about this, particularly my people, black people. That said, I think the substance of Will's point still stands in that he did do some experiments, and I'm actually going to go into some of these videos really quick. And these are meant to be a kind of social experiment. Now, here's the thing about these, though. I don't trust this way of, if you want to consider this like real useful data points, you got to take these with a grain of salt for several different reasons. Number one, it's not clear how robust the data is. Because there's no data to comb through. It's not like there's a certain amount of interviews, and every single one of the interviews that were done, whether they serve the kind of propagandized purpose or not, were recorded, and we can all check the data objectively for ourselves. It's that somebody went to a college campus, talked to some students, filmed it, edited that film, and then showed us what they wanted to show us. So what he did is not, strictly speaking, scientific as far as my understanding of it. Now, if he published some kind of data that's objective and more robust than what I just described, then more power to him, and I would love to review that data. I don't know if he has made that accessible. So forgive my ignorance if that exists, and he has. But to my mind and to my knowledge, and I may be speaking in ignorance here, complete ignorance, I don't think he's done that. And if he didn't do that, then his videos that I'm going to show you examples of right now are not going to be as useful, because what we're trying to get at is the truth of what people actually believe. And if he just basically constructed a compilation of the dumbest people he could find saying the dumbest things he can find in order to kind of propagandize, see, college is worthless because there's a lot of dumb people in college who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's like, that's not a very fair way of framing this at all. And I think that this could be more robust, and like this could have been done in an more academically valuable way, an intellectually honest way. And I don't know that he was trying to deceive anybody or he was trying to propagandize. He may have just attempted to generate some evidence in favor of a position that he didn't quite think out the implications for how he would conduct it in a manner that was basically scientific. He might not be aware, he might not know, he might be super biased, or he might be trying to propagandize. I wouldn't put it past him, but I'm just saying I don't know. So I'm gonna show you these videos and let you see them for yourself in a quick second. But like, yeah, man, it's just interesting. It's just interesting to me, like, how like unwilling people from both sides sometimes seem to be to engage in good faith with these things. And like, really consider the possibility that they may be like dead wrong in terms of their basic assumptions of these things. Like that I'm flabbergasted by that at times. All right, so let me pull this up real quick. So I had to like find the videos, and then if we have to, we'll come back to this video. I want hopefully I can pull it up in a separate one, but it might replace it. All right, this is when he dressed up in a sombrero. Yeah, it's gonna replace it. Okay. All right, so here's the PragerU video. I'm gonna go ahead and let you see it.
Hola amigos, this is Will Witt with PragerU. Today we're at UCLA talking to college students and on Olvera Street talking to Hispanics in honor of Halloween and to see if my outfit is offensive. Dang it. Would you guys like to chat with us today?
That's cultural
No?
appropriation.
That's what we want to talk to you about. Hola. You find my outfit offensive?
Yeah.
You find it offensive? Do you find it offensive?
Maybe a little.
Do you think my outfit is offensive?
Are you Mexican?
No.
Yes.
I think it reaffirms stereotypes that.
Let me make
are
sure I haven't
offensive to
stereotyped you real
people.
quick. All right,
You
you're
think
not
people
Mexican?
really
Okay.
think Mexican people are like this and carry around marachas?
No, I don't think people
Maraca?
actually think that.
Do you find my outfit offensive?
Yes. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's not your culture.
Cultural appropriation? Why do you say that?
Because you're not like Mexican.
You think Mexican food is like cultural appropriation?
No.
Someone else's culture that we've kind of taken. Is this cultural appropriation?
You're so sweet.
No comment.
You don't really understand what their culture means and what it means to wear these things, like the hats and the maracas. You sort of have to understand where all of this comes from for it to not be cultural appropriation.
It's not yours.
So if you just understand where it comes from, it's not cultural appropriation?
Can I just ask you, do you like my costume?
I like your mustache.
Do you?
Mostly.
Does my outfit offend you?
You look no. You look nice.
Thank you. Do you like my costume?
Yes.
Does it offend you?
Es ofensivo.
No. No, nothing. That's good.
Me guapo?
I was gonna wonder. I was gonna
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
I was gonna comment on that.
Cabo, are you guys insulting me?
No, it's not.
Insulting me in Spanish? Do you like my outfit?
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
Does my outfit offend you?
No, not at all.
Some people get offended by what I'm wearing.
No, it's not. It's not offensive. I think it's you're in the right atmosphere.
Lo único dice de mostacho, no original.
No, no original. Do you know who sold me this?
No idea.
Mexicans.
Oh, really?
So you're white and you get offended, but then Mexican people who sold me this and made me this don't get
Yo,
offended.
the irony is hilarious.
Yeah.
Seems kind of
I get the
weird,
point
doesn't
being
it?
made, but it's-
I love it, actually.
You think it's offensive?
No, not at all.
Some people get really offended by this. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm legit.
I don't know, just you're not Mexican, so people think that you have to be Mexican to wear that.
I'm celebrating
I'm watching this for
Mexico.
the first time.
That's awesome.
Are you Mexican?
I am.
See?
I'm not wearing it.
See? Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we should swap outfits.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we do, again, I have to reiterate, we have to take that with a grain of salt because there's a lot of decision making that went on behind the scenes in terms of what clips they were going to show, how much of it they were going to show. We don't really have any frame of reference for any interviews that took place that weren't shown there, that weren't, so to speak, on message. And we have to be aware of that if we're going to be objective. And it's for that reason that we got to take this with a grain of salt. However, I think it did do a pretty decent job of demonstrating something that I think is generally true, which is that there are certain pockets where white liberals are, where they tend to be offended on behalf of certain groups that they think of as in some sense marginalized, either historically or contemporarily. And so the part of the motivation for those who are sincere and are genuinely compassionate for these groups is that their sense is that those people are being done wrong and that they're witnessing some kind of harm, non-trivial harm being done to those groups. And so they're offended on their behalf, even though ironically, members of those groups don't even be tripping like that. And I think that's part of what he's trying to show. And I don't have any doubts that that's true, actually. And in fact, I know for a fact that white liberals be tripping over shit that black people, like on behalf of black people, that black people don't even be tripping over like that. Like calm down, woke white liberal. It ain't that deep. And I get it, because there's a kind of cultural milieu amongst the kind of woke progressive types generally, but especially the woke white liberals, whereby there's a whole bunch of presumptions around the kinds of things that are inherently harmful and offensive. And a lot of this stuff is promulgated on college campuses. And so in some sense, this does an adequate job of exposing some of that. I don't know that this video or these types of videos are the best way to get the clearest, most accurate picture on the whole, like every university in our entire country. I think some universities are probably worse than others. I think UCLA is probably among the worst offenders in terms of proselytizing wokeness. I went there, and I went there before that shit became batshit fucking crazy. That shit got way worse after I graduated. I graduated in 2011. Right around 2014, 2015, it started getting really bad. Berkeley is another one, and there are a lot of others too. And a lot of these kind of like woke tarded ideas, they actually start from very real, genuine places. And there's a lot of validity to the origins of the ideas. But then it's like a game of telephone, and after a while, they just start getting stupider and stupider and stupider, and they start losing touch with reality in a fundamental way. But this seems to happen in academia, in academic spaces, where all of the smartest people supposedly are, and so they confer a sense of legitimacy via their expertise as academics and the learned among us, upon increasingly quixotic and absurd ideas that it's really easy to demonstrate are stupid when you try to apply them in the real world to catastrophic effect, which is one of the one of the biggest demonstrations of that are a lot of dumbass Democrat policies that are motivated to help the downtrodden in various different ways and end up making shit worse. The cringy virtue signally shit that they proselytize and they go after. So you have like what's going on with these hands-off, soft on crime policies. That's what the people right of center call them. But what's going on in the Tenderloin right now, San Francisco, is a fucking travesty, and it is the direct consequence of philosophically, ideologically misguided policy that are being implemented by Democrats who are motivated by, I think, in many cases, a genuine sense of compassion, but who haven't really thought it through in terms of how things work in the real world. And a lot of their philosophical assumptions, right, are being challenged by the terrible results of the implementation of those policies. So not throwing people in jail because that's not the best way to help actual drug addicts, and the idea, the basic idea that you want to only punish you only want to punish violent crimes, and you don't want to punish poor people for being poor, and you don't want to keep people in jail, so cashless bail, that kind of thing. These are all motivated by compassion, and I think they start from a genuine place of compassion, and the compassion part, the compassionate impulse, makes sense. But like, if you're so ideologically blinded to other dimensions of these issues, like the fact that it seems that a lot of human beings don't respond well to compassion at all, that a lot of human beings actually respond a lot better to punitive measures, and if they and or some kind of accountability where they are forced to take responsibility for the fucked up shit that they say and do to themselves and other people, and the negative consequences that in aggregate a whole bunch of people doing these things have to a given region, a city, a neighborhood, a society, etc. Blaming it all on the white man, it doesn't really seem to like make much sense when you think about it, because there's a lot of white people with a lot of great intentions who are implementing policies which are basically making it really, really easy for people who are breaking laws that are very sensible laws. There's not nothing wrong with the law, Laws that are explicitly prohibiting people from like beating other people up are pretty good laws. Explicitly prohibiting people from raping other people, from murdering other people are pretty good laws. Laws that are explicitly prohibiting the distribution of drugs that are extremely addictive and that lead people to do all kinds of fucked up shit, including but not limited to violent crimes, like some of the crimes I started with, in order to get their fix. Right, like those are inextricably linked, and if you can proselytize that root cause shit all day, but at the end of the day, like motherfuckers are getting access to hardcore narcotics and are having their entire lives upended by their addictions, and they're doing all kinds of fucked up shit in order to satiate those addictions. Okay, setting up homeless camps where you give people methadone and then in effect, right, enable drug dealers who are giving drugs laced with fentanyl, which is even more addictive than methadone. And it's like the whole purpose of you giving out methadone is a replacement in the first place. But if all you're doing is being all hands off and being super libertarian about it, it's like, hey, people are going to do drugs. We can't do anything. We can invite them to get rehab, but if they don't want to get rehab, then oh well. Like, then all you're doing is enabling the drug habits, and you're making the matters worse. And we're seeing that in San Francisco right now, where recently more people died of drug overdoses than COVID. I'm gonna repeat that. More people in this city died of drug overdoses than COVID. It's fucking embarrassing. And motherfuckers that are hands off like Chester Boudin, who just got the boot recently as a result of it, partially as a result of it. Like, these are the negative consequences of these well-intended policies. And I can talk your ear off about policy after policy after policy by Democrats that were well-intended but had catastrophic consequences for the very people that they were meant to help. It's a common thing with Democrat policies. And they're the main ones trying to proselytize themselves and present themselves in the most virtue signally cringy way possible as champions of the downtrodden and the least of us. They care so much as long as you vote for them and give them campaign donations. They virtue signal their ass right into the White House and then don't do shit for people at the end of the day. But we can act like it's the no good, evil, very bad Republicans exclusively, or that it's the white man or whatever. But some of the people who are guilty of this aren't white on the left. Actually, they're actually black and brown people that proselytize this shit all day. Don't do shit for black people or brown people or the downtrodden or the poor. Yep. But they talk a good game though. $15 minimum wage. Joe Biden. Remember he said that? Remember that? How's that coming? How's that going? Just a question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to.